unveiling the Xbox.
Hello, I'm Bill Gates, chairman of Microsoft.
Tonight's kind of a celebration. It's after a lot of hard work.
Ready!
Oh, Halo. Hey, how could I forget Halo?
Welcome back to our countdown to Xbox 360, where we are literally counting down to the next generation of gaming.
You'll see Xbox will actually start up. We can bring that video up.
Microsoft has a lot to do over the next few months. They are on a death march now.
Some faulty Xbox 360s are literally melting down while running certain games.
With Kinect, we made you the controller.
Stick with 360, that's your message if you don't, like it?
If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device.
Xbox One is the future. And at its very core, it must be simple, instant, and complete.
When I think of the Xbox, it isn't about any type of console loyalty. It's the games and memories that I have behind them. Staying up until ungodly hours of the night to play Halo customs, or running around a Crackdown lobby with a friend just laughing our asses off. Standing outside of a GameStop at midnight waiting for the latest big title, or even just chilling in that weird Avatar movie theater thing watching Netflix with a friend. To me, the Xbox was synonymous with community, and the platform empowered us to connect with our friends, or even make new friends within a huge variety of games. Xbox and Xbox Live dominated my teen years, and it wasn't until I'd moved off to college and started playing less games that I really realized just how cool the Xbox ecosystem was for that time, something that I would argue is one of the peak eras in gaming. Lately, it feels like Xbox has lost its way, and its first-party titles have been a mixed bag of different failures. From a once leader in online gaming and just console gaming in general, to taking a back seat just to sell as many people as possible on Game Pass, Xbox has lost its way. Even Phil Spencer has a quote basically saying that great games won't shift Xbox sales. And he's right. One good 10 out of 10 game today probably wouldn't do that. While back in the day, Xbox had great games worth playing on a regular basis. Something that hasn't been true since the start of the 8th generation, where the great games are more seldom and spread out. While I wouldn't go out and buy a console for one specific game, give me 4 or 5 in a couple year span and it becomes more and more tempting. But how did we get here? To understand where we are today, let's take a look all the way back at the beginning. The year is 2001, and the company most known for the operating system on our PCs has decided that their newest tech venture was none other than the video game console market. A market they were arguably decades late to, with entire companies discontinuing their consoles before Microsoft even announced. Regardless though, this would be the next venture, and at CES 2001, Microsoft would announce the brand that many of us would come to love. Now, absolutely cringe announcement aside, the Xbox was set to come out later that year and would be tasked with taking on two juggernauts in the gaming market, Sony and Nintendo, both of which had been building their fan base for years. While a seemingly impossible feat, many had thought that this would be something that would be the end of Microsoft, but that was the task that Microsoft wanted to take on because they felt they could compete in the space, and compete they did. Now, the original Xbox wasn't really a success. In fact, despite decent sales of over 24 million units, the console lost Microsoft over $4 billion during its market lifespan. A pretty penny, no doubt, but Xbox was here, and it was here to compete. The original Xbox was the first to feature a built-in hard drive disc and would also introduce Xbox Live later in 2002, which was a subscription-based service to play games online. This service would end up dominating the online multiplayer space in later years, but this was only the beginning, as a service like this was only useful once you had the killer apps behind it, which did build over time as the service got more and more robust. Now, we could get into hardware specifics, but honestly that isn't really my jam and probably isn't yours either. Because while gaming websites fawn over specs every time there's a new console, most people don't go out and buy X console over Y console just because it has better hardware. If that was the case, Nintendo wouldn't have any market share. Instead, let's take a look back at the first-party games of the original Xbox generation and what made the Xbox special even in its early days. Microsoft came out swinging in 2001, dropping a console with a whole collection of great first-party games. Halo Combat Evolved being the biggest and arguably best of the bunch, but titles like Dead or Alive 3, Fusion Frenzy, Project Gotham Racing, and even Oddworld's Munch Odyssey gave gamers a variety of different games that they could check out on their new console. Whether you wanted racing, a first-person shooter, or a party game to play split screen with the boys, the Xbox had a choice for you. But they wouldn't just stop here, as throughout the rest of the generation, Xbox dropped titles like Halo 2 and Fable to buff up the first-party games, along with things like Knights of the Old Republic, which was only released on PC and Xbox. Now everyone has their favorite games, and we aren't going to name every game that dropped on the Xbox, but at the end of this 6th console generation, Xbox had carved out a decent market share, barely outselling Nintendo's GameCube. However, both were unfortunately blown out of the water by Sony's PlayStation 2. In this generation though, Xbox began to build up what would help it take off in the next generation, and that was Xbox Live. With the help of amazing multiplayer games like Halo 2, Xbox Live allowed players to pay a subscription fee to play online with their friends and random gamers alike, including new features at the time like a friends list and a single identity across all the Xbox Live titles instead of having a different profile for every single game. It also made voice chat a more common thing than it had been in online play, especially on consoles. There was no doubt, compared to its competitors, the Xbox with Xbox Live was leaps and bounds ahead in online console gaming, something we wouldn't really see Sony catch up on until the later end of the 7th generation. Xbox at this time was an awesome experience, in its infancy for sure, but games like Halo CE and Halo 2 were making massive waves, to the point where you'd regularly see Halo referenced in mainstream media. At this time, it was no question that Bungie's Halo franchise was carrying the Xbox brand, but some of their other franchises definitely had their fan bases too. Now you can even argue back then that Sony and Nintendo probably had a larger quantity of good first-party games than Xbox, but between first-party games and Xbox Live, Xbox was no slouch in the market, shown by sales during the generation, and they would only build upon their IP as time went on. Xbox at the time seemed like it knew what it wanted to do: be the market leader in online gaming. So they strived for just that, by putting out games that both complemented that, but also made sure they had a good variety of single-player games for those not interested in online play. A quick scroll through the highest sold games on Xbox show a good variety of these types of games, with obviously Halo leading by a large margin. Moving into the 7th generation is really when Xbox began to gain steam though, and it was off the backs of the pillars built during the prior generation: Xbox Live and solid first-party franchises that gave people a reason to join the Xbox ecosystem. During this generation, we saw the PlayStation 3, Nintendo's Wii, and the Xbox 360 all come out between 2005 and 2006, with Xbox leading the charge, something that definitely helped them gain some market share early on, as not only did they come out first, but it also ended up being much cheaper than the PlayStation, and actually being in stock, unlike the Wii, which felt like it was impossible to get one for well over a year after its launch. Now, the Xbox 360 was not perfect. Launch editions had rampant red ring issues that caused it to die on a fairly common basis, as well as the disk drive scratching disks constantly, and even later models bricking with dashboard updates. However, despite this, Xbox was able to power through all its issues and gain a ton of momentum from the previous generation's successes. Xbox Live saw huge improvements during this time, and while it was and still is criticized for having a subscription fee, back then it was a better product than both PlayStation and Nintendo Online's capabilities by a large margin. So obviously, Xbox Live played a huge part in Xbox's success. Here in the States, it felt like everybody was on an Xbox. If you wanted to play games online, you bought an Xbox. But if you wanted to chill and play single player, well, then maybe you'd go and get a PlayStation. And then there was the Wii, which basically found the cheat code into people's living rooms. So while at the end of the generation, the 360 was actually the lowest in terms of sales, it wasn't actually until 2013 when the PlayStation 3 would pass the 360 in sales, which makes a lot of sense when we start to take a look at what happened during this generation. Now, I want to keep the focus of this video mostly on Xbox, as this isn't meant to be one of those console war style videos, and I personally just play games wherever. But for me, the end of this generation, leading into the next one, is where Xbox seemed to really lose their way. Prior to this point, the first-party offerings of the Xbox had been hitting it out of the park, and even deals with Activision and other third-party companies made it seem like Xbox was the place to play these third-party games, something that would completely flip later on with things like Call of Duty. The 7th generation was full of generation-defining Xbox first-party games, and obviously, when you talk about that, we have to talk about Halo 3. Halo 3, which dropped in 2007, felt like it completely dominated those early years on the Xbox 360. It was a fantastic game that had something for everyone. An incredible campaign, a timeless multiplayer full of variety for all sorts of gamers, outlets for creative people with Forge and Theater, a strong landscape for competitive gamers with Ranked, and the most defining aspect of the game, a social experience full of modes that focused on just having fun, and included things like proximity chat to add even more fun to those moments. Halo 3 wouldn't be the only first-party game, though, to make a splash during the early years of the generation. Fable would see its sequel Fable 2 in 2008, and the trilogy of Gears of War games, starting in 2006 and ending in 2011, all had fantastic reception, something many gamers still look back upon fondly today. Not only were these games great, these first-party titles also had amazing marketing and trailers. But unlike many cases today, where gamers feel lied to or misled by trailers, these hyped-up trailers were backed up by amazing products. We also saw Xbox drop Forza Motorsport to directly compete with PlayStation's Gran Turismo, and we even saw Xbox make Saints Row an Xbox exclusive, giving Xbox their own GTA competitor, even though GTA was also on the platform. It is worth noting, though, that towards the end of the 360 generation, we would see the creation of Forza Horizon in 2012 as well, which has gone on to be one of Xbox's most successful franchises in the modern age. Xbox would even pump money into BioWare, who put out a fantastic single-player RPG, Mass Effect, in 2007, which would make its way onto PlayStation 3 the following year. The same thing happening with Mass Effect 2, being an Xbox exclusive for a year in 2010 before coming to the PS3 in 2011. While I won't lie, that year-long console exclusivity sort of sucks as a consumer, Xbox was there making the plays to make their console feel truly special. Even some of Xbox's less successful first-party titles for the 360, in terms of sales, ended up being really amazing. Games like Crackdown, which a lot of people picked up just because it gave you beta access to Halo 3, Viva Pinata, Shadowrun, Halo Wars, even Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, all having tons of fans and players. Xbox wasn't just Halo or just Gears. The ecosystem was full of fun and varied IP. Again, the 360 wasn't perfect. We talked about the actual hardware issues, but the direction of the console also took a weird shift. In what I assume was an effort to compete with the Wii, the later years of this generation saw Xbox going heavy into the Kinect, something that has been completely abandoned today. The Kinect would take resources and developers off of making good games to make a bunch of Kinect games, some of which weren't that bad, but for me, there wasn't really anything that made me go, man, I really need an Xbox. Instead of seeing some of these first-party devs work on new banger IPs or even just sequels, we got multiple lifeless Kinect spin-offs of existing IPs or just random Kinect games that weren't built for the core audience that Xbox had been growing for years. Xbox's best franchises also started to falter toward the end of the generation, and their huge lead in online gaming was only shrinking as PlayStation started to get their act together. However, it is funny that even today, Nintendo's online functionality seems decades behind despite all of their success. Something that shows having a vision and doing what you do best will bring success rather than just chasing success somewhere else. Halo, which was Xbox's biggest brand, saw their creators Bungie basically force their way out from Microsoft to go work on their own IP, leaving Microsoft to create a new studio to take over the franchise, 343 Industries. With Halo Reach being Bungie's last game, and while the game had a lot of questionable choices that led to less player retention than the prior game in Halo 3, overall, looking back, Halo Reach is still a pretty strong title that just needed a good sequel to get the franchise back on track. However, that isn't what we got. 343's first game, Halo 4, was basically the opposite of what longtime Halo fans wanted. And while you can find Halo 4 fans out there that love the game, despite selling well, was a huge stain on the franchise and can be seen in the huge player drop-offs, something both Halo 3 and even Reach hadn't seen. Gears of War, one of Xbox's other flagship franchises at the time, also started to falter a bit. While the first three games are all held in very high regards, Gears of War Judgment was not received the same. Judgment, which released in 2013 and developed by People Can Fly instead of Epic Games, was heavily panned, and similar to Halo's story, ended up seeing the developers move on, leaving the IP in Xbox's hands, a decision leading to the creation of the studio The Coalition, who would go on to put out the later Gears of War titles on the following following generation. Another one of Xbox's flagship IPs, Fable, also completely went off the deep end at this time. While Fable 1 and 2 were both received really well, Fable 3 did see slightly worse reception, and after that we never got another main Fable title, only seeing a weird Kinect spin-off in 2012 and an Xbox Live Arcade beat-em-up in Fable Heroes. We also saw later on a Fable card game that would get canned as well. None of these games were well received or did anything to revive the franchise, though there is supposedly one coming out in the future, so fingers crossed for the longtime Fable fans still around. We would even see Xbox pick up Minecraft at the time, bringing it to the 360 in 2012, though it would come to PlayStation the following year and eventually Nintendo's platforms way later on. Another big thing that made the Xbox feel so special at the time was the Xbox Live Arcade, a digital-only store that allowed people to publish games on the Xbox Live Marketplace, something that we had not seen much of up to this point in the console world, as indie gaming had mostly been a thing on PC. Games like Castle Crashers would come out of this too, having massive success along with somewhat meme games that ended up being really fun with friends. Games like Doritos Crash Course or the weird trivia game called Family Game Night that you could play with your little Xbox avatars. There was no doubt a lot of shovelware though on the Xbox Live Arcade, similar to Steam, but there were also tons of gems that you could throw some time into if you wanted. And I remember playing all sorts of weird Xbox Live Arcade titles. My editor, Chipmunk, has this weird obsession with Yaris, which was a racing game built entirely around the Toyota Yaris, which I'm pretty sure was some hybrid car back in the day, and to be honest, this game is total ass cheeks. But on the Xbox Live Arcade, you could find things like this, and some of it, like Yaris, were even free. At the end of the 7th generation, despite Phil's words, I would say that the success of the Xbox was a variety of things, like hardware choices, timing, and Xbox Live. But to me, looking back, a lot of it was that Xbox actually had good games, and a lot of them. They were generation-defining games in a way that Xbox has completely dropped the ball on in recent years. After this came the meme of the 8th generation, which Phil said is when they lost the most important generation, and it's true. The Xbox One sucked. Not only is the name completely dumb, but they also originally tried to market it as an entertainment box instead of just being a video game console, something that seemed completely misguided. Phil made it sound like they got absolutely dominated in this generation, and that just simply isn't true. Sure, PlayStation was the clear victor here, outselling them by double, but Xbox left the 8th generation easily in 2nd place, something they can no longer claim, as in recent times Nintendo has more than recovered with the Switch. During its lifespan, there were lots of weird choices for the Xbox One. The choice to go even more ham on the Kinect, originally making it so you had to buy one with the console, was one of the dumbest things ever. The core issue of this generation from Xbox was just lacking in good games, which is something that you couldn't say about the prior generation. I am going to ignore all the Kinect stuff moving forward though, because I'm sorry, Kinect games just suck. So instead, I'm going to list some of the big titles of the Xbox One: Sunset Overdrive, Halo the Master Chief Collection, Halo 5, Gears 4 and 5, Dead Rising 3, the Forza and Forza Horizon games, Rise Son of Rome, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Quantum Break, ReCore, Crackdown 3, Sea of Thieves, State of Decay 2, and Halo Infinite. Notice anything about that list compared to the list of the 360? Well, not a single one of those games can be classified as a must-play or a generation-defining game. Sure, some of these games are pretty solid, and games like Sunset Overdrive, or even maybe Halo 5, deserve a lot more credit than they're given, but many of these games were either totally broken, like the Master Chief Collection, or just straight up duds like Crackdown 3, with a lot of the other games falling somewhere in the middle. I will still never get over how broken MCC was, and I feel this set a precedent for future Xbox titles. In 2014, I bought an Xbox One with the plans to play MCC with all my friends and relive some nostalgic memories. But the game was so broken, it literally never worked for me. Instead, my Xbox mostly just collected dust for the next year until Halo 5 dropped, which also came out unfinished. But hey, at least this one worked. Xbox's games lineup has completely lost its way, and this starts with their core franchises no longer leading the way like they used to. This is in stark contrast to something like PlayStation or Nintendo, where you can still see their first-party games regularly knock it out of the park. God of War, The Last of Us, Uncharted, Mario, Zelda, Smash Bros, and the list goes on and on. When one of these comes out, you know at the very least it's going to be a Game of the Year contender. Xbox just hasn't had that in years, though hopefully something like Starfield or future id Software games can at least put up a fight in that regard. Xbox's best games these days have been smaller titles, and that continues in the 9th generation despite the fact that Xbox has bought up a ton of studios to try and fill this gap. In recent times, it feels like Xbox's best game was Hi-Fi Rush or Grounded, which, don't get me wrong, are awesome games, but these aren't flagship franchises by any means, and that's pretty obvious with the marketing put around them. Gears 5 was middling, Halo Infinite missed the mark, and Redfall was a total flop. And that's sort of it for huge Xbox releases in recent years outside of the Forza games, which are still doing well. So all of that brings us to today. Later this year, we're slated to get Starfield, which has a lot riding on it, as it feels like Xbox really needs a dub. But these days, it feels like Xbox has totally lost its way. At one point, they led the charge in online gaming and put out tons of games to complement this, with a good variety of single-player games too. But these days, it feels like Xbox is happy to just sell Game Pass subscriptions and call it a day. While I'm not a console loyalist by any means, I miss the good franchises of Xbox, because it felt like they were willing to go down paths that Sony and Nintendo didn't usually go down. In the 7th generation, we saw all three brands bring their best, and we got some absolute bangers. But these days, it feels like Nintendo just keeps on killing it, and PlayStation puts out amazing first-party titles. All the while, Xbox, well, releases games like Redfall. I'm not saying that we need Gears or Fable or even Halo to be amazing again, but gaming is so much worse when Xbox continues to publish mid or underwhelming games on a regular basis. Sure, one game isn't going to sell a console, and it seems like these days Xbox is content on not even competing head-to-head in the console market. But you know what? I'd love a Game Pass with some amazing Xbox first-party games too. Xbox has been very content to purchase up developers and let them do their own thing. In some cases, this works out great with things like Hi-Fi Rush and Grounded, but there have also been all sorts of stories of Xbox allowing its devs to flounder without supervision, ultimately releasing bad products. Redfall is obviously the most recent of these stories, but even things like Halo Infinite and the Perfect Dark remake, which have gone completely silent, leads to a lot of questions from consumers as to what is going on at these studios. Now, I'm not saying that Xbox needs to get in there and start ruling with an iron fist, but something needs to change, as the quality of games coming from Xbox these days has been nowhere near where it once was. There's obviously the looming Activision merger, if that ever gets approved, and if it does, who knows what that all would even entail, but for now, I would love to see Xbox put out their own games again that are actually good, and if they end up getting to put Call of Duty under their banner, then so be it. I just hope that they can start to repair their own house in the meantime and get some good games out again, because relying on Activision Blizzard to save the day is, well, a very sad and scary thought. Very soon, we're going to get the 2023 Xbox Game Showcase, and I am hoping to see more than just Starfield that piques my interest. I really want to get that glory era of Xbox back, because gaming is better when all the companies are doing well, just like they did during that 7th generation, something you can't really say rings true today. And that's gonna do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Again, huge shout out to all the people supporting over on Patreon. You guys are what makes videos like this possible, and if you want to support the channel, it's pretty much the best way to do it. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, you know what to do, and I'll see you all next time.